Maggie McCulloch, and I'm in Miss Whitsett's third period class.
And I'm Elaine James, and I'm in her first period class. This summer, we read David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell, who is a highly regarded writer with a degree in history from the University of Toronto. A lot of his books are featured on the summer reading list for Byron this year, such as Outliers, The Tipping Point, and Blink, which are all New York Times bestsellers. Gladwell is noted for his journalism in the Washington Post before joining the critically acclaimed New Yorker magazine in 1996. In David and Goliath, Gladwell tests how we think about obstacles and how the underdog can sometimes come out on top.
We all know the story of David and Goliath. Goliath is this huge giant of a man who challenges the Israelites to send their best warrior to fight hand-to-hand combat with him. And nobody rises up to the challenge except for a young shepherd named David. Now David is this little boy with no protection, no combat experience, and only armed with a sling and 3 stones. Looking at this from an outside perspective, it seems as though David was inferior. However, what Gladwell manages to do throughout his book is question if these underdogs are really as disadvantaged as they seem. In the second to last paragraph of the introduction, Gladwell writes, in reality, the very thing that gave the giant his size was also the source of his greatest weakness. And later he writes, and that the powerful and the strong are not always what they seem.
Going off of what Maggie said, underdogs and misfits have similar struggles. Misfits are the people who don't fit in and often don't try to. Gladwell writes about the Impressionists, a group of artists in Paris, France, 1874. They were a group of friends who would meet and paint every day. What they painted was very unconventional at the time. They went against the popular traditional idea of art, painting everyday life with visible brush strokes, and their figures were indistinct. The kinds of paintings that won medals were completely opposite. They were these huge canvases showing scenes from French history or mythology. Now, the Impressionists didn't let it get to them that people thought their work was unprofessional and amateur. If they had given up when they were being harshly criticized, their paintings wouldn't hang in every major art museum in the world.
Vivek Ranadive took a group of girls who were inexperienced in basketball and pitted them against teams who had been playing for years. Ranadive himself didn't fully understand basketball, so instead of conforming to how other teams played, he made his own style. It was unconventional, and opposing teams were confused on how to proceed. Not knowing the correct way to play made them more apt to try something out of the norm. As we learned from David and Goliath, the best way to battle a giant is by going the way least expected. Nobody anticipated the team would play full defense, just like no one thought David would go into the valley with just a sling.
You may be thinking, all that is great, but why does it matter to me? Well, through this book, we can learn how to overcome obstacles of circumstance, like size and ability. We see that we don't need to fit into society's definition of normal to be a success. Just because we may not get the highest grades doesn't mean we won't go far in life, and not making the varsity team won't ruin our sports career. Obstacles of circumstance are overcome in many of this book's chapters. For example, Ranadive's basketball team and Teresa DeBrito's class size. Also, many of the people discussed in this book could be considered misfits, like the Impressionists or Emile J. Friedrich. However, they are still some of the most successful people of their fields.
Overall, David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell is an entertaining book that takes real-life examples and places it into a context that provokes the audience to read between the lines, and to explore why some underdogs aren't actually underdogs at all given the right determination and motivation. He takes stories ranging from dyslexia to class size and civil rights movements to college. These topics range to fit all kinds of interests, but they all tie into the same concept, that underdogs are not as disadvantaged as they seem, and even the worst, tallest giants can be defeated. Experienced in basketball. Inexperienced in basketball! Okay, so David, this little sheep boy, he goes up to Goliath and he's like, I'ma fight you, but I only have 3 rocks, and he nails the giant with the rock. I am an infant.
Nobody.
Say his name like Vivek Ranadive. Vivek Ranadive.
One sec.
Vivek.
Brush strokes and their figures were indistinct.
Wait, made.
Wonderful.